Let me start by giving you some background, so this whole story makes more sense. I go to a public university in California. It's one of the UC schools. Some campuses in the system, like UCLA, Berkeley, and Santa Barbara, are really large, but others like mine are much smaller. The bigger schools usually host something called a tour day for future students, but really, it's just an excuse for students to throw wild parties. Berkeley has Cal Day. Santa Barbara has Deltopio's kinds of events. My school is about 2.5 hours away from UCSB. And while most students don't make the drive, a few do every year. I'd always skipped out since I'm not big on partying. But earlier this year, I realized I was in my last year of college. I figured this might be my only chance to experience it. So when my friends invited me to tag along to Deltopia, I said sure. We headed out that Friday afternoon. The day before the main festivities, our group included Hunter, who was driving, along with Damon, Armin, Benjamin, and me. Every one of us is over 6 feet tall, so the car ride was cramped, but it flew by thanks to good music and conversation. When we arrived in Isla Vista, we spent nearly an hour driving around trying to find parking. It was packed. Right as we were about to give up, Hunter managed to charm a sorority girl into letting us use her reserved spot. It was ridiculous but hilarious. Everything was going well. Hunter's sister, who was a junior at UCSB, offered to let us sleep on the floor of her apartment. That might sound rough, but during Deltopia, just having somewhere indoors is a win. She and her roommates were cool, so we all decided to start drinking with them that night, even though the actual event was the next day. Now there's someone you need to know about Amir. He's not really part of our close group, but somehow always finds a way to show up. He's loud, insecure, constantly needs attention, and just makes everything awkward. Hunter had mentioned Amir once said he was going to Deltopia, but we didn't invite him, and none of us gave him any details. We assumed he wasn't coming. But when we left the liquor store an hour later, there he was standing outside like he'd been waiting for us. Nobody said anything, we just kept walking. Amir casually joined us like he'd been part of the group all along. He said something like, "Why do you all look surprised to see me?" And honestly, we were shocked. Nobody told him where we were staying, and we hadn't even discussed plans with him. Still, we stayed quiet, hoping he'd get the hint. Back at the apartment, things got weirder. Amir asked if he could use the bathroom, and Hunter reluctantly agreed. Amir ran ahead, and when Hunter's sister opened the door, Amir just walked in and said, "I'm staying here," like he had a place. She didn't recognize him, but assumed he was one of our guys. When Hunter found out Amir had lied to his sister, he was furious. After a short but intense argument, he told Amir to get out, and this time, he meant it. Amir didn't leave, right away. He stood outside the apartment arguing for almost 20 minutes before finally giving up. After he left, we got pretty drunk and couldn't stop talking about how creepy it was that he showed up. Then Hunter remembered he'd shared his iPhone location with Amir weeks ago and never disabled it. That's how Amir found us. The next day, Deltopia was everything people say it is. Total chaos in the best way. We partied all day and returned to the apartment, where a few more friends had joined. We told them about Amir, and Riley, of the new arrivals, said he might still have Amir's location on his phone. He checked, and his jaw dropped. Amir was basically right on top of us. Then, just as we were reacting to that, the dot moved quickly away. It was like he'd been sitting in a car nearby, watching us. We probably should have taken it more seriously. That level of obsession was beyond normal. But we shrugged it off and kept drinking. Late that night, after everyone had passed out, I randomly woke up. Before I could even think, I heard glass shatter somewhere in the apartment. I got up, my heart racing, and looked around. Everyone else was asleep, probably too drunk to hear anything. I grabbed an empty wine bottle and quietly walked toward the noise. When I reached the living room, I saw the sliding glass door had been smashed. A heavy rock was lying on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. My stomach dropped. I knew immediately it had to be Amir. I turned to go wake the others, but before I moved, I saw the closet handle twitch. It moved slightly. Someone was inside. I stood frozen for a second, debating whether to open it. Then I backed off and ran to wake up Hunter. I told him what I saw, and he grabbed a flashlight and came with me. But by the time we returned to the living room, the closet was empty and Amir was gone. Hunter reached into the closet and pulled out a huge kitchen knife. My blood ran cold. Amir had been standing in that closet with a knife, probably waiting for me to open the door. If I had, he might have stabbed me. We woke everyone up, called the police, and explained everything. All they did was take a report and say that vandalism happens a lot during Deltopia. Amir had turned off location sharing by then, so we had no proof. The next day we left. Before we drove off, Hunter tried to message Amir a long, angry text, but it didn't go through. Amir had blocked all of us. We never heard from him again. He completely vanished. Honestly, I still get paranoid thinking about it. He knows where each of us lives. I just hope we never see him again. Story 2. Back in high school, I had a friend named Ethan. We weren't super close, but we had a few classes together and hung out sometimes after school. We both played Xbox and followed the same YouTubers, so we always had something to talk about. Ethan was a bit odd, quiet and kind of off, but not in a creepy way, just different. He transferred to our school during junior year and never really found a group to fit into. I tried to include him when I could, especially since he didn't seem to have many other friends. One night, Ethan invited me to his place to play video games and chill. I didn't think much of it and said sure. They've never been to his house before. He lived with his mom in a neighborhood I wasn't familiar with, kind of isolated compared to where most of us lived when I arrived. His mom was super friendly, offered me food, drinks, the usual stuff. But once we went to his room, it felt strange. He had blackout curtains, barely any lights on, and his room was incredibly clean, almost too clean. No clutter, no posters, no typical teen mess. His bed was perfectly made. I tried to ignore it. We played Xbox for a while, but Ethan kept pausing the game to ask me strange questions. Things like, do you ever feel like people are watching you, or do you think you could disappear and no one would notice? I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. Then, out of nowhere, he stood up and said he wanted to show me something. He opened his closet and pulled out a small notebook. Inside were pages filled with names written over and over, and mine was in there too. I asked what it was, trying to stay calm. He smiled and said, just people I want to remember. That's when I said I had to go. I made up an excuse, said I had work early the next day. He didn't argue, just smiled and said, okay, thanks for hanging out. But as I left, I heard him say behind me, I'll see you soon. I didn't go back after that. I avoided him at school, and after a few weeks he stopped trying to talk to me. Then, one day, he just disappeared. No one knew what happened. Rumors went around, some said he moved, others said something worse. But I never found out the truth. Story 3. About 2 years ago, was working night shifts at a small motel off the highway. Most nights were uneventful, just checking in late, travelers, restocking, doing basic maintenance. But there was one night I'll never forget. Around 2 a.m. a man walked in. He looked completely normal. Business suit, briefcase, polite smile. He said he needed a room for the night. I gave him a key and told him where to go. But something felt off. He didn't have a car in the lot, and it was pouring outside. Where did he come from? About 30 minutes later, I noticed him on the security camera standing outside his room, just staring at the parking lot. He didn't move for over an hour. I called the room. No answer. I used the intercom to ask if everything was okay. Still nothing. Eventually I walked over to his room and knocked. He answered immediately, but his expression was different, blank, cold. He said, I'm fine, just watching. Back at the front desk, I watched the camera again. Now he was standing in the hallway facing the front desk, just staring at the camera, not moving. I called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. The room was empty. No luggage, no briefcase, nothing. We never figured out where he came from or where he went. And I still have no idea what he meant by just watching.